Justice will not come top down. Justice will only come from the bottom up, and that's what we have to do. And until so again, the solution is never going to come from the courts. The solution is never going to come from pencil-necked geeks in robes or wigs or whatever they're wearing these days. The solution can only come from the people who demand justice, not simply hope for the courts to create it out of thin air.
So you say demand justice. How do you do that? What does it look like? What does it look like?
You saw what happened with Mahmoud Khalil, right? We saw a bunch of protesters in Federal Square demanding his release. We saw a bunch of protesters at Trump Tower, inside Trump Tower, demanding his release. That's the kind of energy that we have to bring across the board everywhere, right? Not, Khalil is being held not in Manhattan, he's being held in Louisiana, right? He's being held in Jena, Louisiana. We need to do the protest in Jena, Louisiana. Now, I'm not a great marcher, Roland. I don't like walking, much less marching. Right? That's not my thing, right? But like at some point, somebody needs to give me a shovel and some wire cutters, and we got to go to Jena, Louisiana, and we got to do our thing there. Like justice will not come top down. Justice will only come from the bottom up, and that's what we have to do. And until we do that, until we're willing to do that, until we have the sustained pressure of the people against this administration, the courts ain't going to do jack.
Morgan got a kick out of that one there. Morgan, your comment or your question for Elie?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the question I have is, and I appreciate all of your analysis, Elie, so it's great to connect with you. Your message is hit the streets. The people should hit the streets. I wonder if that's the same guidance you have for members of Congress, because as we know, they have different tools at their disposal. If you were speaking specifically to members of Congress who do still believe in the rule of law and what to do what they can to protect that, what would you like to see them doing?
Yeah, I think we're going to need a little bit more than placards, right? Like the silent auction at the State of the Union for fascism is not going to cut it. Obviously, Congress has more tools at their disposal. And look, I also have respect for the fact that many of our Congress people are old, right? Just to put it frankly, right? And I don't want them to get hurt. So there is a level of street level activism that many of them just physically can't pull off, right? I'm out here talking about I don't like to march because I'm overweight. They don't like to march anymore because they're crumbly, and we need to respect that. And so I'm not in the position, I would never be in the position where I'm going to tell some 75-year-old congressperson to go do something that is better done by a 23-year-old activist, right? So setting that up, the level of resistance that we need to have from Congress has to be post-institutional, right? Has to be extrajudicial, right? The idea that all they can do, that all they should be doing is using the normal means and powers and structures of government to oppose Trump in the normal ways, that isn't going to cut it. That hasn't cut it to this point, right? So you want to talk about lawsuits? I don't want to the Congress people should be suing Trump in their personal capacity if they still think that the courts can help them, right? Congress people should be the ones hiding, literally hiding some of these documented, because we're beyond undocumented. He's doing this to documented immigrants. Congress should be hiding those people in their offices, in their homes, and daring Musk and Trump and the U.S. Marshals to come take them out, right? We should be hiding in churches, calling for sanctuary, the old Catholic version of the Hunchback of Notre Dame version of sanctuary, right? And daring Trump's forces to breach the threshold of a house of God. That is the level.
But do you think they've actually exhausted all the tools available to them institutionally even? I mean, this idea of Congress members personally suing, that's not something I've heard any of them talk about. Holding or starting investigations. I think that's an important point, because I don't know if we have a full understanding. I don't know if they even have a full understanding of all the tools available to them that are distinct from everything you just named. Anybody technically could do that, right?
Elie, to that point, explain to people when you say how they should personally sue. Explain what that means.
Right. So in general, Congress sues as a body, right? Like it is the U.S. Congress that's suing for this or that or the other thing. But you can't do that when you're in the minority, right? Mike Johnson controls what Congress can sue for. John Thune controls who Congress can subpoena because the Republicans control the government. So I'm saying instead of doing it that way, since the Republicans won't let you, sue in your personal capacity, right? Sue as like a concerned citizen. It'll get a lot more media attention if, I don't know, Chuck Schumer sues Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Dodge, as opposed to me, right? Chuck Schumer is the senior senator from my state. He can sue as a New Yorker, right? And then we have our fight in the courts where we'll probably lose because, again, I keep saying the courts are not what's going to protect us or help us. But Roland, just like you were talking about earlier, in terms of like having hearings, having rallies in Mike Johnson's district to get the people Mike Johnson represents to understand the threat and the values and the problems that Johnson is causing, that's what I'm talking about in terms of personal lawsuits. Do it so that the people can rally around you and understand what the problem is, regardless of what the courts do to it. Because again, in my theory, we're extrajudicial now. We're beyond the courts now. I want Jeffries on the Supreme Court steps arguing his case, even if the Supreme Court's going to ignore him, because that's the kind of thing that the media will cover, and that's the kind of thing that will alert the people, not just people like you and me and Morgan, but it will alert people who don't pay a lot of attention to politics and law and that kind of stuff, that we are in a completely different situation, that we are in a completely new state, and thus we need to use completely different strategies and actions and what have you. So just to quickly answer your question, Morgan, no, I do not think that Congress and Chuck Schumer have exhausted all of their institutional possibilities here. I don't think that they've even crossed the 50% threshold with that.
Larry?
Thanks for your analysis. So I've argued kind of what you talked about is that the Democrats on the House and Senate are far too focused on decorum and not discord. And I'm wondering, in terms of when we have this conversation about some of the challenges that we're seeing as it relates to what we're supposed to see from the judiciary, people filing lawsuits, judges saying you can't do this and being ignored. Are there lessons we can learn from the time of Charles Hamilton, Thurgood Marshall, in terms of not only in terms of what they did, those great legal minds did, the Supreme Court, federal cases, et cetera, but are there other lessons we can learn in kind of that Jim Crow era in terms of what we're facing today in terms of these systems, people saying, I'm not listening to, in the Deep South, I'm not listening to, this thing, what the Supreme Court says, et cetera. Are there lessons that we can learn from the legal perspective in terms of how we attack some of these issues?
Yeah, so number one of the lessons that we learned, that we should learn, and I hope liberals finally do learn, is that the courts are not going to save us, and they never have. Like, we tend to remember people like like Thurgood Marshall as people who bent the courts to the will of the civil rights movement. But Marshall loses those cases if there isn't a civil rights movement backing them up, right? Let's never forget. Brown, my mother was born in 1950 in Clarksdale, Mississippi. And she likes to say the 1954 decision on Brown v. Board of Ed didn't mean jack crap to her. Didn't desegregate a damn thing in her neighborhood. Desegregation was not brought to us by the Supreme Court. It was brought to us by the people. It was brought to us by the movement. And quite frankly, it was brought to us by Bobby Kennedy putting boots on the ground in Arkansas and forcing white folks to chew with their mouths closed, right? The court couldn't do that, wouldn't do that, literally writes in their opinion with all deliberate speed, meaning desegregate whenever the hell y'all feel like it, if ever. So the courts were never going to save us. They never have. So I think that's one crucial lesson to learn. The other big lesson that I hope Democrats are learning is exactly what the limits of judicial power are. Maybe Joe Biden should have learned that lesson when the Supreme Court ridiculously and unconstitutionally, in my view, overruled a woman's right to choose. Maybe Joe Biden should have been a little bit more aggressive, a little bit less genuflecting, a little bit less kneeling to the court's unelected opinion, and done everything he could with federal power to protect the lives of women and girls who had unwanted and lethal pregnancies. Just saying, right? Donald Trump last week goes to the Department of Justice, which breaks with tradition, and people clutch their pearls. Oh no, he's speaking in the Great Hall of the Department of Justice, and basically has an hour-long rambling speech where he threatens to sue everybody under the sun. Now, I'm not saying Joe Biden should have done that, but perhaps, I don't know, Roland, you back me up here, could Joe Biden have called Merrick Garland and said, hey, Merrick, how are we doing about, prosecuting the guy who attacked the Capitol on January 6th?
Damn Skippy.
Just asking a question.
Wait a minute, hold up. They were so, oh my God, there's a wall between us, that they would not even tout DOJ victories from the White House podium during the briefing. I mean, it was utterly ridiculous. Like, they literally wouldn't even talk about the success stories because, no, we've got to have separation. No, you don't. You could actually talk about that, but they wouldn't do it.
Kristen Clark is one of I've written about this. Kristen Clark is one of our Black heroes of the past 4 years. And most people don't know her name because Joe Biden would never talk about her successes because of the wall between. Hey, here's another one. Remember when Bill Clinton talked to Loretta Lynch on a plane? And
the right lost their mind.
In Democratic ideology, somehow that meant that Loretta Lynch had to recuse herself from the Hillary Clinton email case, which meant that James Comey was in charge of the Hillary Clinton email case, which meant that it was James Comey's call, not Loretta Lynch's, to reopen the case a week and a half before the election and basically hand the thing to Donald Trump. Remember when that happened? That happened because, allegedly, of the breaching of the wall of whatever between the White House and the DOJ, even though Hillary Clinton was not the president at that point, and it was her husband who talked to Loretta Lynch, not her. So again, maybe one of the lessons the Democrats could learn here is to stop bringing spoons to a gunfight. Maybe one of the lessons here is that the Supreme Court is not actually in charge of the entire country, that there are 3 branches of government, and if the Democrats are ever fortunate enough, if Trump ever allows them again to control 1 or 2 of those branches, maybe they should take that power more seriously.
Mustafa.
Well, Elie, it's good to see you. It's been a while.
It's been a while, man.
Yes, brother. I got a 2-parter for you. So the first part is, Black folks, I come out of the grassroots movement. Black folks been marching. We show up. We put our bodies on the line. What are your thoughts about what this needs to look like this time? Because, a lot of brothers and sisters have said, you know what, I have marched for important issues, but I need to see some other allies actually putting something and some skin into the game. So that's the first part. Second part is, we've got a set of elections, right, moving up to the midterms. What's your vision for what we need to be doing in that space so that we at least have a chance to balance out some power here?
Yeah, so in terms of the marching and the activism, I'm with the Black folks that you're talking about in terms of we need to see some allies now. We need to see some other boots on the ground. It can't just be us. One of the things that this election has proven, that this administration has proven painfully in some ways, is that Black people cannot save this country from white folks. We can't do it alone, right? If white folks aren't going to join in, if white women aren't going to join in, if Latinos aren't going to join in, we can't do it alone. And so at some point, these other groups of people that Trump is also attacking have to join the battle. And I know that for those other groups, the worst thing that you can do is ask them to join with Black folks. I know that's their least favorite thing. I understand that, especially for immigrant communities, to be treated as white in this country, the first step is to crap on Black folks. I get it. I understand. their perspective. But if they want to improve this country and have, I don't know, freedoms in this country, they better get over themselves and ally with Black folks, because Black folks cannot save this country by ourselves. That is number one, right? In terms of the the elections coming up, look, man, I've been a Democratic voter all my life. I've never voted third party. I don't think I can vote for a single Democrat who voted to, say, confirm Marco Rubio, which would be all of them in the Senate. I don't think that I can vote for a single Democrat who voted for Trump's budget. I just don't think that I can do it. And so what that means is that I have to be one of those people who is on fire during the primary process, trying to get a better crop of liberal candidates on the ballot and through the primary process. The primary process is where this fight has to be won, because if you put it in a general and you read to, and I have to choose, in 2028 between Chuck Schumer and Don Trump Jr., I'm going to vote for Schumer again. I'm crazy, but I'm not an idiot, right? So I have to do everything in my power to not let that happen, to not let that be my only choice. And that means going hard for whoever is going to primary Schumer in 2028, and going hard for whoever is going to primary these weak and useless Democrats in the lead up to 2026. That's where the fight has to happen. That's where my focus has to be. And to the extent that I have any voice or platform, what I am telling everybody is to show up for the primary elections in 2025 and 2026 as if it's the general election in 2028. That is how important these primaries are. I like to use the example of the Tea Party, the Republican Tea Party, the failed Republican Tea Party that actually metastasized into the MAGA movement that now runs the country. Where does the Tea Party start? Does it start with them taking out Democrats? No. The Tea Party starts with them taking out Republicans who they believe were not committed to the cause. And that is what Democrats must do. That is what liberals must do. Take out so-called Democrats and so-called liberals who have now, to this point, shown themselves to be insufficiently committed to the cause of fighting fascism. That's the focus. And that's where my energies are going to be going in the lead up to the 2026 elections.
All right. Elie Mystal, always a pleasure to have you on the show, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for having me, always.
All right, folks.